Most people are not destroyed by what happens to them. They are destroyed by what their mind turns it into. That is the truth almost nobody wants to face. A word is said, and it becomes disrespect. A silence appears, and it becomes rejection. A delay happens, and it becomes proof that you do not matter. The event itself is often small, but the meaning attached to it grows instantly, silently, violently. And by the time you notice what is happening, you are already inside the reaction, already carrying something that was never fully real in the first place. That is why so many people live in emotional exhaustion. Not because life is constantly attacking them, but because their interpretation of life is. The world says one thing, and the mind says 10 more. The world gives a moment, and the mind builds a story. Then the body reacts not only to what happened, but to everything that was added to it. Memory, fear, pride, insecurity, expectation, identity. And suddenly, one moment becomes a wound large enough to poison the rest of the day. This is where most people become weak without understanding why. They think their suffering proves the event was powerful, but often the event was only the spark. The real fire came from inside, from meaning assigned too quickly, from stories believed too easily, from internal patterns so old and automatic that they no longer feel like interpretations at all. They feel like truth, and that is what makes them dangerous. Carl Jung understood this with uncomfortable precision. He said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That line shifts everything. It breaks the illusion that the outer world is fully responsible for your inner state. It places the real struggle somewhere harder to reach, but more honest to face. Not in what happened, but in what happened inside you after it did. A person ignores you, and you feel diminished. A person criticizes you, and you feel exposed. A person leaves, and you feel emptied. These reactions feel direct, natural, almost inevitable. But if they were truly inevitable, everyone would react the same way to the same event. They do not. One person carries a comment for days. Another hears it and lets it go. One person collapses under rejection. Another feels the pain, but remains intact. The difference is not luck. It is not personality alone. It is interpretation. And that is the beginning of real power. The moment you realize you are not reacting only to events, you are reacting to the meaning your mind attached to them. That meaning forms quickly, often before awareness arrives. A delay becomes disrespect. A disagreement becomes betrayal. A neutral face becomes judgment. The mind moves with astonishing speed, trying to protect identity, trying to confirm old beliefs, trying to preserve emotional certainty even when the certainty is distorted. That is why pain often feels larger than the moment that triggered it. The event did not come alone. It activated something already waiting. A memory of being dismissed, a fear of not being enough, a wound around abandonment, a need to be chosen. These things live quietly beneath the surface until one small moment touches them. Then the reaction explodes outward, and you think life hurt you again, when in truth, life only touched what was already unresolved within you. This is not said to blame you, it is said to free you, because if the event itself were the whole story, you would have no real power. You would be condemned to be shaped by whatever the world throws at you. But if your suffering is intensified by interpretation, then interpretation can be questioned. And once it can be questioned, the chain is no longer automatic. That is the space the Stoics cared about more than almost anything else. The space between what happens and what your mind makes of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you are disturbed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And you have the power to revoke that estimate at any moment. That is not cold philosophy. That is one of the most liberating truths a person can learn, because it means the event does not own the final word. Your interpretation does. But this is where people resist, because revoking an interpretation sounds simple until the interpretation is protecting something deep. Your pride, your identity, your unmet need for approval, the desire to be respected, chosen, understood, admired. The mind clings to its meaning because that meaning often keeps an old inner structure intact. Even if the structure produces suffering, it feels familiar, and familiarity can feel safer than freedom. So real mastery begins when you stop asking only, "What happened to me?" and start asking, "What did my mind make this mean?" That question is a blade. It cuts through exaggeration. It cuts through emotional theater. It cuts through the first dramatic version of the story. Suddenly you start seeing the gap. The event was one thing, the meaning was another. And in that gap, your reaction loses some of its absolute power. This does not make you emotionless. That is not the goal. The goal is not numbness. The goal is precision, to feel without drowning, to notice without collapsing, to experience pain without turning it into identity. There is a massive difference between feeling hurt and becoming the hurt. Most people merge with the reaction so quickly that they never even notice the merge happening. But once awareness sharpens, the process slows. You start seeing the first layer, the tightening in the body, the instant conclusion, the old story rising. And for 1 second, maybe only 1 second, you do not obey it automatically. That second changes everything. Because in that second, you are no longer purely the reaction. You are also the one observing it. And the observer has room. Room to ask whether the meaning is accurate. Room to ask whether the pain is entirely about now, or partly about then. Room to separate what was actually said from what was assumed. Room to say, maybe this does not mean what I first believed it meant. That is where inner freedom begins. Quietly, not through grand breakthroughs, but through repeated moments of not immediately believing the first interpretation your mind offers. Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and this is why. Reality gives the moment, imagination multiplies it. Reality gives the comment, imagination turns it into rejection, humiliation, proof, prophecy. Reality gives the silence, imagination turns it into abandonment. The event hurts, the added meaning often hurts more. Once you understand this, something inside begins to calm. Not because the world gets softer, but because you stop helping it wound you so deeply. You stop turning every difficult moment into a statement about your worth. You stop making every silence a verdict. You stop treating every act of rejection as evidence that something is fundamentally broken in you. The world may still be imperfect, but it no longer gets unlimited authority over your identity. And that changes your life in practical ways. You stop reacting so fast. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing closure from people who cannot give it. You stop letting one conversation poison the whole day. You stop handing your nervous system to every careless person you meet. You begin to protect your inner life, not by hiding from the world, but by seeing the world more clearly. This is what most people misunderstand about strength. They think strength means becoming untouched. But real strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to be defined by what you feel in the first seconds. It is the discipline to let the wave rise without calling it the ocean. It is the maturity to let pain pass through interpretation before it passes into action. It is the wisdom to know that not every sting deserves a story. And over time, this changes your posture toward life itself. You become harder to shake, not because nothing reaches you, but because fewer things are allowed to become more than they are. You become calmer, not because life becomes predictable, but because your mind becomes less reckless with meaning. You become more stable, not because you control the world, but because you stop giving the world instant access to your center. That is the mastery. Not control over every event, not immunity from pain, but command over the meaning that once turned every small wound into a private collapse. So master this, the space between what happens and what you make it mean. Master that, and the world will still test you, but it will no longer own you. People will still disappoint you, but they will not define you. Life will still hurt sometimes, but it will not keep rewriting your identity every time it does. Nothing and nobody stops hurting you because they become softer. They stop hurting you because your interpretation stops giving them that much power. And once that power returns to you, even quietly, your whole life begins to feel different, clearer, calmer, harder to disturb. Not because the world changed, because you did.